Well, police moved in on protesters in Kiev's Independence Square today, and the protesters fought back as Ukraine's conflict over EU membership took a violent turn. Riot police broke up the rally using batons and stun grenades. Several people were injured, including some police officers. The protesters are angry about a last-minute decision by the government to give up on a trade deal with the European Union. They say the president caved under pressure from Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin, and they want the decision reversed. Alex Klemenov is a freelance reporter covering the new political turmoil in Ukraine, and he joins us now from Kiev. Alex, what happened when police cleared Independence Square?
Now, this happened really very abruptly. This was essentially the remains of the protest, because the protest was really sort of dying out after the accord with the EU wasn't struck. There were maybe just a couple of hundred people left on the Independence Square in the middle of the night, and then at 4 in the morning, the police, the riot police, swiftly moved in and violently started clearing the square from the protesters. And many were packed into the police vans, and in the morning, the square was circled by a fence, and the workers were installing a Christmas tree and a skating ring. Now, what happened then, the protesters didn't disperse. They instead moved to a different square up the hill next to a monastery, St. Michael's Monastery, where some of them were hiding from the riot police that actually chased them down. And they were hiding in the monastery, and they barricaded inside. And then more people started coming in the morning, and by the end of the day today, the square is now filled with tens of thousands of people who are saying they're now determined not to have Ukraine join the trade deal with the EU, but have the government and the president and the police chiefs resign immediately.
Alex, we've been taking live looks at the protests all day, and as you mentioned, tens of thousands. They've just been growing, really massive protests. A lot of people. Why is there so much anger over this decision by the government?
Well, this is not because the deal with the EU wasn't struck. That protest was going on last week when the government announced that they were not pursuing the accord anymore, even though for months they were saying they were ready to sign it. But when the police moved in last night and beat up people, and there was blood spilled on the square, some photographers, journalists were beaten up. A famous Ukrainian singer was there blocking the police cars with her own vehicle. This really outraged people, because this never before happened in Ukraine. All of the protests before were pretty peaceful, and the police would just stand at the side and not intervene and not beat up people so violently. And now the rhetoric of the protesters has really changed into we want the president to be responsible for this. President Yanukovych actually issued a statement today saying he is appalled by what happened, but this statement only fueled the protesters because they can't understand how the president of the country didn't know that this was in the plans and that this violent end of the protest was supposed to happen.
Alex, you mentioned that protests have been going on for weeks when the government didn't sign the EU trade pact, and there's been talk that a lot of this has to do with influence from Russian President Vladimir Putin. How are people interpreting that?
Well, people really don't care much about Russia. What they care about is that Ukraine finally becomes a civilized, normal country, not ruled by the mafia. They just want to make sure that when they go to the judge rules based on the law and not on who brings more money in his pocket. So they just want a normal country, and signing an accord with the EU was giving people some hope that there would be more control from the West over, for instance, the money that's given to the Ukrainian government, and less interference from Russia, which is pretty much functioning on the same model as Ukraine. You don't really know what's going on and who is benefiting from what. So people were really supporting this course for the Ukrainian development, and now it just all changed so abruptly, and they're saying the government and the president betrayed them.
All right, Alex, we really appreciate your time and your insight. Much appreciated. Alex Klemenov is a freelance reporter in Kiev.